Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning for Telesur. I'm Reagan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Thank you so much for being here with us on From the South. We begin in Havana, Cuba, where an historic step toward peace in Colombia is expected to be taken in the next few hours. The Colombian leftist FARC rebels and the government will apparently be signing an agreement regarding justice and reparations for the victims of the more than 5-decade-old conflict. President Juan Manuel Santos, who announced that he would be in Havana in a few hours, said that peace talks delegations would begin meeting in an attempt to speed up the peace process, which has been ongoing since late 2012. Lawmakers in Colombia expressed contentment with the process. A day after Venezuela and Colombia met in Ecuador and reached a 7-point agreement to resolve the crisis of the border, consultations between both nations will continue in the following hours in Caracas, the Venezuelan capital. Officials from both countries will discuss a bilateral plan to improve conditions at the border. They will decide on ways to fight drug trafficking and Colombian paramilitary groups that control crime at the border. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said the possibility of creating a just system of selling gasoline will also be a topic during today's talks. And in the meantime, in Colombia, lawmakers and social leaders have expressed optimism following the plan agreed to by Colombian and Venezuelan presidents over the border crisis. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita reports from Bogota.
Strengthening bilateral dialogue and gradually normalizing the border situation are the overall objectives of the 7-point agreement reached by the Colombian and Venezuelan presidents, who have also agreed to reinstate their ambassadors. There is relief among those political leaders who have persistently advocated for diplomacy.
Ambassadors represent the interests of each country, but they're also the expression of accompaniment, cooperation, and the mutual recognition between states. So I believe it's a very positive message that Venezuelan ambassador in Bogota, as well as the Colombian ambassador in Caracas, get back to their agendas, now with a special commitment to what has been agreed.
As political and social leaders welcome the agreements and the success of diplomacy, members of former President Álvaro Uribe's political party called on foreign minister to express their disagreement over the way Colombia has been dealing with the border crisis.
Colombian borders with Venezuela and Ecuador used to be inflamed due to the attitude of former President Álvaro Uribe. We have realized that international relations policy was useless. Instead, this time diplomacy prevailed and it has worked out. Now we need to address the core issue and resolve the structural problems of the border.
Those sensitive issues that have to do with paramilitarism and smuggling are expected to be addressed and resolved during a ministerial meeting that has also been agreed. These two will be accompanied by Uruguay and Ecuador, which hold the presidencies of the regional blocs CELAC and UNASUR.
UNASUR has been a champion. It has shown that a conflict between this continent's nations will not be allowed to happen. That's simply impossible, and is another important message. The strong commercial, political, and cultural integration we have not just between Colombia and Venezuela, but across the Latin American continent will definitely prevent our conflicts from being solved through war.
Colombia's peace advocates have reaffirmed the importance of dialogue and international respect in resolving disputes, something the Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa also emphasized at the end of the bilateral meeting. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
Still in Colombia, President Juan Manuel Santos announced a new way to deal with coca growing. He said the government will grant land to all those coca leaf farmers who, during the next 5 years, stay away from illegal crops. Cocaine production in Colombia surged more than 50% from 2013 and 2015. This despite an aggressive US-backed crackdown. Santos also announced that beginning October 1st, Colombia would no longer use the herbicide glyphosate. The chemical is said to cause cancer.
First of all, we must reach an agreement with the communities so they get rid of the coca crops voluntarily. And this has to happen now, not over time. If an agreement cannot be reached, we will have to get rid of the crops by force.
Protest action and unrest in Mexico continues in connection with the forced disappearance almost a year ago of the 43 Ayotzinapa students. On September 26, 2014, the students were violently attacked and 43 of them were abducted, never to be found again. And while the Senate debated between creating a special national committee or an international commission To resume investigations into the case, students in Guerrero clashed with police for a second day in a row. 9 people were injured. The authorities blamed the incident on the students, when in reality the police blocked them from advancing toward Mexico City.
These people, in an aggressive way, with tear gas canisters, some homemade rockets, attacked the state forces during a routine checkup.
Peru's First Lady Nadine Heredia insisted that she is innocent of corruption before hearing at the public prosecutor's office. She said that journals allegedly containing evidence supporting allegations of her involvement in campaign financing, violations and money laundering are not hers. She said she would cooperate fully with investigators. Heredia also claimed that the allegations are part of a smear campaign against the government on behalf of political enemies ahead of general elections next April.
As I have repeatedly stated publicly, the documents presented today, like journals and schedules, and the contents of these journals and schedules are not my property.
The issues of immigration, world peace, an end to poverty, as well as racism and discrimination in the United States are among the topics that Pope Francis is expected to address during his visit to the country. Our correspondent in Washington, Bianca Perez, has those details.
The Vatican flag decorated the streets of Washington, D.C. as the city awaited the arrival of Pope Francis. Although His Holiness will begin his official agenda on Wednesday morning, peaceful protests took place asking the pontiff to speak out for an end to war, poverty, and the climate crisis, among other social issues.
This action today is part of Campaign Nonviolence, and this is a national movement. There's over 260 actions going on across the country, the United States, this week as part of Campaign Nonviolence. So we're here to connect the dots between war, poverty, climate crisis, police violence, and try to create a culture of peace and nonviolence.
Dozens of activists marched to the White House displaying their campaign banners, hopeful that the government and the Pope would hear their plea. They are confident that the pontiff will express in his meeting with President Barack Obama and Congress the same messages that he has previously expressed in other nations he has visited.
I think it would be a real shame if he doesn't say to Congress what he has said elsewhere. This is the nation that makes war. This is the nation that sells the weapons. This is the nation that drives the destruction of the climate.
These social activists want a restructuring of the government in which the people's voices are heard and respected.
What we would like to see is a whole new way of running our system. Right now, our system of government is controlled by the wealthy corporate financial elites who are profiting from the fossil fuel industry, from war, and it's all to the detriment of everyone on this planet.
More protests are expected during the Pope's 48-hour stay in Washington, D.C. They will be asking the pontiff to deliver their messages to the different members of the U.S. government. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
And now we have a brief of other stories for you making news around the globe.
As the European Union countries struggle to reach an agreement regarding the massive flow of refugees, thousands of asylum seekers continue to pour into the region. The bloc estimates it will receive at least 1 million refugees by this year's end. They say only half are legitimate refugees. The EU foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels to discuss ways to efficiently face the crisis. So far, they have agreed to plan to share out 120,000 refugees across its 28 states. 4 ex-communist nations were opposed.
In and by itself, the decision we took today is not going to solve the refugee crisis. But without this decision, I think we would not have been in a possibility to now take the next steps to make sure that we do better at protecting our external borders, that we do better at registering people immediately when they arrive, that we do better at making sure that people who have a right to asylum stay, but those who don't have the right to asylum are returned swiftly to where they came from.
In Yemen, civilians continue to be killed in erratic Saudi-led coalition's airstrikes. Since the Saudis began their airstrikes March 26, thousands of civilians have been killed according to the United Nations. In the most recent attacks, at least 20 innocent civilians were killed. Dozens more were injured as warplanes pounded their houses in the capital, Sana'a. A rescue official said 2 missiles destroyed 4 houses, killing mostly women and children. Rescuers are still searching for survivors under the rubble.
Around 7:30, the plane struck. It wanted to hit the home of Al-Taif, a Houthi military leader, but his home is far from here, and instead the homes of these poor people were hit. They have nothing to do with anything. After the first strike, the people ran to the basement of the house, but then a second airstrike hit, and it killed them all off, buried them.
And the Volkswagen saga continues. The German automobile manufacturer has admitted to cheating on emissions tests. They have acknowledged that this affects 11 million cars worldwide. The cheat has resulted in vehicles emitting up to 40 times more nitrogen oxides than what is considered standard. This according to the Environmental Protection Agency. VW tampered with the emissions test and could be fined up to $18 billion for violating the Clean Air Act. It will also face a series of lawsuits.
A sad day in sports. Major League Baseball legend Yogi Berra has died at the age of 90. He had begun his outstanding career in 1942 when he was hired by the Yankees for $500. In 1972, he became a Hall of Fame catcher for the New York Yankees, a team he later managed for many years. He played in 14 World Series and won 10 championships. He also led the Yankees in runs batted in for 7 consecutive seasons.
You are the sculpture.
For more on these and other stories, please visit our website, telesurdtv.net/English for Telesur English. I'm Regan Devines. Have a safe day.